Robert W. Walker. I was born in a little town called Midland in Clinton County, about my father ran a restaurant and his grandmother had a hotel. I had two brothers and a sister. The brothers have passed away. Sister's still living. Anyway, I got drafted. I was going to college and they sent me a draft notice to report that spring. And I asked for an extension to finish that semester, which they allowed me. And I was then taken into the Army in September of that same year. They just shipped us to Fort Meade, Maryland. I was up there about 3 days processing, and then we spent about 3 days on a troop train going to Fort Riley, Kansas. And from there on was basic training, 16 weeks of infantry. They were training me for the infantry. And then right before Christmas, I got transferred into the Army Security Agency, which was totally different. When I got to the Army Security, it dealt with information and all the personnel for the enlisted men, such as assignments, get them all ready to go to a certain place, and then when it came time for discharge, we took care of their papers and everything. So it was more paperwork. In 1953, when Eisenhower was elected president, and they were getting ready for the inaugural parade. And our unit was chosen as a unit that would be up front in the parade route as guards. You've probably seen them standing along the, well, that was rumored that it came true, and they had said that we were going to be carrying carbines, which later on they said we weren't. Then they said we'd wear a bayonet, which was filling out. So the last thing they said, if you see any trouble occurring, take the initiative by using your body as a shield. So it ended up we didn't have anything but an overcoat, and a peanut butter sandwich, and boiled egg in our pocket. Threw my duffel bag over my shoulder, went to the train station and waited that day, wandering around D.C. And then when the train left, I got on. The next morning, about 9 o'clock, I was home. And the next day, I started right back to school. I went back to school at Wilmington College, small college here in the area. I later went to Xavier University for graduate work. Got a master's degree, and I took a couple other courses along the way, which I That was my schooling. First one in was trained to be an infantryman, and when it changed, I saw a different side of war. But I felt sorry for those who were being trained to be sent directly to Korea. I would say think it over very thoroughly and make certain that that's what you'd like to do, and to consider what area in the service you would like to attain. A couple of three things. When I graduated from college, when I graduated from Xavier and got my master's degree. But along with that, that's when I got married. And when my two children were born. So there are other things, but that's probably stand out in my mind.
John Abbot. I was born in Fulton, New York, March of 1936, and I spent most of my younger years in that area. We lived with my grandfather out in the country, a very rural area, so there wasn't very much to do. We didn't go on vacations or anything like that. My dad was in the Marine Corps for World War II, from 1942 to 1945. My first time in service was basic training. I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, from Fort Dix, New Jersey. When I got inducted, I was inducted and went to Fort Dix in New Jersey. And then from there they shipped me to Fort Benning, Georgia for training. I was there for 16 weeks. When I was in the military, when I was in Germany, because I knew how to type, they put me in the personnel office and I did morning reports. I visited Denmark, Spain, Italy, around Germany somewhat. I was in the Army with Elvis Presley. We were stationed in the same location, and I met him several times. He was a pretty good soldier. I was transported back on a troop, what they call a troop ship. It was all military guys going back to the States. We got into New York City, and we were sent over to Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn. And then from there we were processed out of the military. And that was my last day, was in Brooklyn. And from Brooklyn I flew back to New York, to where I lived. I went back to my old job. I worked for the New York State Labor Department. It was a good experience. I had a good experience. I would say talk to all the branches and choose the one that you think is the best suited for you. I think military experience is good for people, especially young males. Get some of the vinegar out of their blood veins.
Paul Schlie. I was born in Cincinnati on June 14th, 1929. My dad worked at a Federal Reserve Bank. My mother was a housewife. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I was the oldest. They gave us a battery of tests, and from that, they had a list of places I might be suited for, or things I might be suited for. And I picked to get into Army intelligence. The Korean War was going on when I was drafted. I went to intelligence school in Baltimore, Maryland, and I I joined the Counterintelligence Corps of the Army. And I had 4 months of school in Baltimore. And from there, I went to Germany. Went sightseeing through the towns in Germany, and I was fortunate enough to take a couple of trips when I was there. One was 1 week to Italy. We went by train, and I got to see 5 or 6 cities. And then later on, I went to Paris, France, for a weekend. Those were my two trips. I did a lot of sightseeing. I like to get out and walk through the countryside, walk through the German forests. They take care of their forests over there, and it was pretty nice. In January of 1953, I was pretty excited to be getting out. It was in 1953, and I just sightseeing at home too, and met some of my buddies who were there. Some of them were drafted at the same time. They went to different places, but we compared notes. I went to my old bank, to the old job. I was given a different type job, but it was the same company, Interchemical Corporation. I wouldn't want us to go to war, only as a last resort. War is, as they say, hell. And if they can get things settled peaceably, it's far better. I see too many of these veterans back with their arms and legs shot off, the ones that came back, and it's not right. I was fortunate enough to marry 2 women. The first one died of cancer after 20 years. She gave birth to 5 kids, and she died of cancer, as I said. And I met one of her friends in church, and I married her, lived with her for over 25 years. She also died of cancer. So I struck out twice, but I had 2 good women, and I was lucky at that, very lucky at that. I have 2 boys, 3 boys, 1 died, and then 2 girls, and they were a tremendous help to me. At the time, I thought I wouldn't want to, after I got out, I wouldn't want to sign up again, but I wouldn't give up that experience for anything. It was good. You learn how to get along with people and so forth. I'm thankful for my service. I hope my kids don't have to serve, and there's no future wars. That's no good for anyone. That's all.
Robert Donald Belleman. I was born in Covington, Kentucky, St. Elizabeth's Hospital, and moved to Cincinnati for 2 years, and then when I was 5 years old, we moved to Norwood, Ohio. My dad was a telephone company switchboard repairman, and my mom was a housewife. I had 1 brother, a younger brother, 3 years younger than me, Mike. About 8 years from, I was born and then raised pretty much in my early years during World War II. And from the time I was about 8 years old, yes, I had a desire, to be a paratrooper. I enlisted into the military so I could get the job I wanted. I wanted to be in the 82nd Airborne where my cousin was, but unfortunately I didn't. I went to the 11th Airborne, which was better. First day in service, we went down to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, overnight by train, and that's where I was processed in, got my clothing and that, and then sent back to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training. My first 2.5 years, I was a machine gunner. And then after 2.5 years, I went to the 3rd Armored Division as a platoon, or as a squad leader. We were what they called the TO&E outfit, a first line, first to go into battle. We were only 30 miles from the Iron Curtain. And so we would be the first units to come in contact with the enemy. We worked a 5.5-day week, and when we were back in the caserne or the barracks area in Germany, we were off and go to the movies, get a pass and go into either Frankfurt or Friedberg or Augsburg. I was awarded the Good Conduct Medal, European Service, the NATO Medal for serving in NATO, and the Expert Infantryman's Badge. My most memorable experience probably was in the airborne, my first couple jumps. I made a total of 23 jumps, and that was my first memorable experience. And going through airborne training school, jump school at Augsburg, that was a very hard course to get through. I was released from active duty at Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and with a bunch of other guys that got out the same time I did, and flew home, and it was a memorable experience after being gone for 3 years. 3 years overseas. For me, it was much harder getting adjusted to civilian life than it was getting adjusted to military life. You knew what you were going to do every day, you knew when you were going to eat, you knew what you were going to wear, and all you had was Saturday afternoon and Sunday to worry about yourself. At home, you had to suddenly go from all this to civilian life where you had to pick out your own clothes, you had to do this and that. So yeah, it was a hard adjustment getting back to civilian life. I started night school and I went back to what I had originally been training for, and that was an engineering job, and went back to doing drafting and that sort of thing, and it just didn't appeal to me anymore. I wanted to work with people. I wanted to be out where I could move around, not sit in an office every day, do the same thing over and over. So I took a test for a fire department, took a test for the police department. Several of my friends that I had went to school with were on the police department, and got on the police department and was there for 28.5 years. My service affected my life by giving me a direction in life. It taught me to be on my own, and it taught me to be able to take orders and give orders, and that helped me in my work. Yeah, I think you should think, is this what you really want to do? And I guess that would be the big thing. Your life is not going to be your own for whatever length of time you sign up for. So think about it, is this what you really want to do? On the police department, it was a semi-military thing. And I advanced through the rank of patrolman, sergeant, lieutenant, captain to assistant chief. And I had a great experience in that, being able to give orders and receive orders and carry them out and make sure they're carried out. Yeah, military experience helped me quite a bit in just my life in general. It was an experience that I value. I was very fortunate in not being in during any type of wartime except the Cold War. And yes, even during the Cold War, we lost some people due to accidents and stuff like that, being run over by tanks at night and things like that. But yeah, it was a valuable experience for the rest of my life.
Edward F. Beck, Jr. I was born in Newport, Kentucky, or Dayton Spears Hospital. Well, we lived in Cold Spring, Kentucky. Went to schools out there. I was the only child of young parents. My dad worked for the transit company, which was the bus line, and my mom was a housewife. And I went to St. Joseph Grade School, and I went to Campbell County High. The first days in service, I liked it. They were good to us. I have a couple of friends that went in with me at the same time. Of course, they give you the best food then too, you know what I mean? Then later on, the slop comes. But anyway, I was an only child, so therefore I didn't ask for anything. I had everything. My parents were very young, and I picked up some friends that were there, and then one of them is still my friend today. And then I talk to his sister about once every 6 months, something like that. So I still have connections in Phoenix. It was just general. Everything was just general. I mean, the food was general. The officers were just general. There was nothing going on, no fighting anywhere in the world. So I just went along with the ride of the troops right here. I stay away from stress because I see sometimes what it does to old people, and so therefore I avoided that purposely. Sort of on my own, even though I was in the Marine Corps, I was still on my own and made my own decisions. As long as they were healthy, and plus, they were good times and everything else, and I was fine, and so therefore I didn't cause any trouble, and I was normal. For recreation on base was like pool table, pool hall, bowling was, well, maybe we were not too far from that. Some of them took up swimming in the ocean or whatever, and then deep diving and all that kind of stuff. For me, the service was a plus. I was an only child. And I needed to be exposed to other children in the or people or men or whatever. You all think you're a man when you're 18, and really not, because you have things that you have to go through. I thought I was a man at 18, and I was, because I was still considered a juvenile. So therefore, you know, but you, in the process of making things up, doing things that are normal that you haven't done before, and all of a sudden one day you're 21 years old, and here I am, ready to leave the service. I liked the military. They were good to me, because I was like a boy when I went in, and I had to change my attitude from a boy to a man. And the transition is not that easy, and I found out the hard way, because there were things I liked and things I didn't like. I didn't want to be favored, but then I still wanted to have an easy job. You know, normal things, you know what I mean? So I did not want to see war or any firing or any killing of people. It was not my bag. I didn't like that. I met the girl who I thought was beautiful when we were young, And so we used to go bicycle riding when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and she was 9 years old. So we met and we got married a year later. And then we had 5 kids, and she's passed. She died this past July, and I miss her terribly because I knew her since I was 9 years old. I took some classes here and there that I thought that I still needed to be acquainted with. Nothing spectacular, just that how to phrase things, how to speak publicly. I've seen and I've met people that had been wounded in the war, and they just wanted to talk to us about the advantages and disadvantages of not having things like no arm, part of a leg, that kind of stuff. And to see that and have the reality in front of you, it's a different story. It's a selective thing. I weighed the pros and cons. I, first of all, went visiting to the service, Navy or whatever it was, Army or whatever it was, to see what kind of people that were, I call it employed for the government or whatever they were doing there. And I picked the one that I thought they would die clean. I didn't want to be all muddy and dirty and full of holes. So I didn't like that. That did not appeal to me. So even though I was in the Marine Corps, I had a very clean job. I think every person, I'd say almost every person, should be exposed to the service. I think it's good exposure. The Marine Corps, I figured, was the best for me. I didn't like the Army. I didn't like the idea of sleeping out in the weeds somewhere at nighttime, or be on a Navy ship and they got tidal waves and all that. I didn't want that. So therefore, I just didn't think about it. But the Marine Corps had exposure to me for things that helped develop me, finished me growing up. And I appreciated that. And I used it, and I made lifetime friends. And it was all nice.
Tama Abrams. I was born in Downers Grove, Illinois, in 1931. During the Depression, of course, and we had to move to New York to live with my mother's parents, relatives. And my dad became a master printer. This was way out in the country, the Catskill Mountains. So we had brooks and rivers, rocks, mountains to climb, puddles to make, dams to build, rabbits to chase, and all the rest. I have one brother that died of lung cancer. He didn't believe that smoking caused cancer. He was well educated. And I have a sister who's 6 years younger than I am, and a brother 8 years younger. Oh, well, that was coming into Loveland Air Force Base, I guess. And they gave you the business. You know, there were a bunch of people down there. Well, it wouldn't make any more difference what rank they were, because we didn't have any. And they'd say, pick those suitcases up, put them down, pick them up, put them down. So finally somebody said, what the hell, you know, and put them down and wouldn't do it anymore. And then we walked to the barracks. And all these girls hanging out of the window saying, you'll be sorry. So then I did wonder, what are we getting into anyhow? And there were all sorts of jobs to sort. If you said you could type, you were in. On every base, there's always a theater and a enlisted men's club, NCO club. And I had different entertainment that would come to town. And after 5 o'clock, we were free to do what we wanted if you had the money. So you could go into town and see a movie there, or have a dinner, which was kind of silly because we got 3 meals a day free. So you'd usually have dinner first and then go out. They picked up, it seems the whole train was designated for women going to Loveland. Started out with 6 in New York City. I was charged of them. And they gave us meal tickets and assigned bunks, everything you needed for the trip. And then all along the way, we picked up a couple more at the time. 2 or 3, and sometimes more. And by the next day, we were quite a lot of us. We got together and everybody started singing. Somebody suggested a song and they'd start singing. And the more girls we picked up along the way, the more they sang. There were about maybe 6 regular passengers in this car. And they didn't know what was going on, but they joined the singing too. And it was quite a, I don't know, to me, I studied music a lot. And to me, it was a great thing, everybody coming together like that and singing. I had to get out by a certain day so I could get it because I had to get a passport to get back to my own country. I didn't have a passport, I had an ID card. They wouldn't, I would have stayed in, they wouldn't transfer me to the same base my husband was going to be transferred because there weren't any women, service women there, which was kind of stupid because I had civilian women. So I think I had a pretty good idea what the military was all about before I went in. I had an uncle who was a colonel, and my dad, and my brother was in at the same time. And later my other brother joined the Navy. I like the way the military, they take care of their own. Depends on whether they have any family in or with experience in the military. I just say look into it thoroughly. If you have any questions, ask those questions before you raise your right hand. Because there's some things, I remember when we first went in and some didn't like it. And they said, I'm going to get out. I'm going to buy my way out. Well, that's not possible. So you've got to know what you're getting into. You're probably meeting my husband. He was in the military, and he stayed in. He has 23 years in. It's kind of hard to tell because if you're talking to somebody that's never been in the military, and, we're a little clannish, I think. And we're proud of our service, even if we didn't see any military action.
Bernard Lewis Abrams. St. Louis, Missouri, 1930. Working, keeping us in shelter and food during the Depression. I have 4, 5, let's see, I had 5, they're all gone, dead, passed away. I'm the last of the Mohicans. USAF, U.S. Air Force. I saw the movie 12 O'Clock High. Well, that had motivated me a little bit. Plus, I was really unsettled on what I was going to do with my life. So I decided to join the Air Force. Yeah, I remember my first day. It's traumatic. Nah, not really. It's unusual. Rushing around doing things they tell you to do. No combat for me. I was mostly a chief clerk, pushing the papers around, stuff like that. Korea, Japan, England, Germany, touched base in the Scandinavian countries. That's about it. I was awarded a good conduct medal, as everybody was. Meritorious Service Medal. The Longevity Medal. That's about it. I can't remember all of them. The most memorable experience I had was going from Korea, taking off in a C-47 over the Sea of Japan. And boy, that was really, I thought we didn't make it. It was very turbulent conditions, but we made it, obviously. I was deciding whether to re-enlist or not, but evidently I did re-enlist. I went to school in in France, the University of Maryland, had night courses, and I took night courses there. I saw the world, which I never would if I remained in St. Louis. Met a lot of good people. Met my wife in the service. When I met my wife, and she made all the difference in the world with me. I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for her. Yeah, if they wanted experience and travel and all that stuff, yeah, I would join up. But yeah, but I would finish education first, and then if you want to spend a couple of years in the service, seeing the world and other things, fine.